directing, in my opinion, we could commit to directing that the CEO deal with what was on there with regard to looking at such things as furloughs, but not only furloughs, and to carry it one step, several steps further along, and talking about revenue, identifying new revenue sources, fees, looking at the improvement of certain collection processes, and looking at what we can anticipate in a number of areas. But I would like to see, my feeling here is, in order to call this a balanced budget, we have to have those as, at the very least, as footnotes or addenda to what is before us. That I do not see, and that is why I raised this issue today, because I expected we would see at least some of this being indicated, and I don't see this. And some of these matters are extremely complex and extremely demanding, and I think it was unfortunate we didn't have those in place this year. I understand why we didn't, but it's unfortunate, and that's why I feel it's important to in effect here, bring this forward at this probably inopportune, inappropriate time.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor, I did read the board action of last week that you indeed did second.
Yes.
That called for these studies and allowed for a time frame for these studies to come back to the board within the second quarter. So I don't think these have been ignored. I think they've been received by the staff and are fully to be vetted at a future date. So I understand what you're saying. It's basically the same thing that was said last week, put into a motion last week and seconded. So I guess what I'm saying is your concerns are not allowing for the time frame for the work to be produced to come back to us.
Well, if I may respond to that, and I'll try to do so briefly. And that is, here is that specifically it says, direct staff to immediately begin to looking at furloughs, and this is a separate phase, and finally direct staff to return to the board on commitments in the second quarter. The furloughs is there precisely because it's such a contentious, potentially contentious matter. It's extremely complicated. I worked on this in some detail pretty much on my own some 5 or 6 years ago when we had a similar situation, and it really never got the hearing it deserved or needed. Not that I was advocating one way or the other, but we were trying to look at salary cuts. We were trying to look at a whole range of things. So that was preeminent because it's the first thing that we kind of moved to in a crisis mode. That's why I felt it was important that we be looking at that straight away. And I expected at least some numbers to be punched in and start looking at what if kind of scenarios. I didn't see that immediately. With regard to other commitments, then that's where we pick up on teeter plan and reimbursing the money we took out of, or were plan to take out in order to balance the budget from the contingency fund, if I have that correct. And so those are the concerns here that I have. I basically, if I had anything that I feel uncomfortable about, it's that in order to get a motion through last week, we did not, or I did not press the points as articulately or as completely as I felt we needed to. And but I did think that those were out there and do need to be addressed now and made part of the footnoted budget before us. Again, it's an interpretation, and I would hope we can move forward on it.
Truly is interpretation. I took it as direction, and the furlough issue, as you say, is going to be very complicated. It's going to involve unions, et cetera, and I certainly did not believe they'd be back within a week to make a presentation on even the preliminary stages of looking at that. So it is a matter of interpretation, and I understand where you're coming from. Supervisor Delbar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Having the chance to take a look at the minutes over the budget meetings we've had, and sharing a lot of the concerns of Supervisor Colfax in terms of how we're going to deal with what is really a difficult budget, and I concur that we are short. I don't think anybody's ever didn't recognize that from a truly balanced budget based on what we've set out to do, we are probably, and I'd say probably at least $1 million light. But we're in a situation today where we have to pass this budget, and trying to take into consideration the comments that I've heard, I'm going to take a stab at a motion here. And it's intent to capture a lot of the issues that we've talked about in these proceedings. So there are several parts to this. The first is to transfer $300,000 from the general fund, solid waste division, to the teeter plan principal payment, making the total principal payment $500,000. And I'm going to editorialize here for a second. In discussions with the CEO, he's comfortable with that amount, given some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with here shortly in terms of solid waste, and that would give us $500,000 total payment